that the one that you guys did together. You were like, and I remember your sounding really good in that. I was like, I wonder if it's that Skylar didn't like run the compression, but he said he did all the like prep and compression that I've been doing, so shouldn't be that. Mm, I guess that's possible. Mm, not necessarily. Yeah, yeah, yeah. uh, yeah. So the I mean, it wasn't terrible, but the last episode definitely had some like that kind of fuzzed out sensation I was talking about, like persisted. Um, I like it. Basically, you sounded flat and kind of fuzzy during editing. Um, but you sound better today. So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. I is Oh my god. I gotta text these guys upstairs. They're just like a herd of elephants. Yeah. Hold on a sec. It's taking me so long to just write this text. I should just walk up. But yeah. I think it generally doesn't actually come up on here, but all right. I'm down to just kind of jump into this pretty quick. I think we are comfortable with the format from last week, and I think being done. The only community shout outs is going to do is going to have these two, the Spent Glory and Path to Glory articles that were different takes on the ping meta. I thought that was cool to have out there. Um, and maybe I mentioned this last time. I'm going to raise it to the group going forward, but might be interested in sunsetting our "What the heck is going on with you" segment. It's not that it's bad, but it's just kind of like some preamble, and I think we have enough of that in the like context and community shout out and all that sort of thing. And um, I think we can always like, hey, if there's something we really want to talk about that happened recently, we can throw that in, but we don't have to like. I basically it has not been here for the deep dives, and I have not missed it. So, um, yeah, yeah, exactly. So, all right. I've gotten under 30 if you want me to just go with it. If you've got something you can go, but okay. All right. Yeah, I'm ready to go. And if we're a little rocky, we'll figure it out. You good? All right. Welcome to What the Heck's your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 degrees below zero. With me, I have, as usual, my frosty but distant co-host, Phil. How are you, Phil? Excellent. We are coming to you to talk about the Force of Frost Universal Rivals deck, also in the uh, I can't. Also in the Death Gorge box set. Uh, it is amazing how much trouble I have remembering that name. I think it's because I keep on like looking for it to have some cold aspect in its name, and it's just not there. But yeah. Uh, but that being said, we this will be the last of our deep dives. After this, you should see us going back to our bi-weekly release schedule, and we'll go from there. For context, it's the 30th of October. There is nothing new to mention as far as important Underworlds info, um, but lots of fun stuff as the US is starting to get its copies of Death Gorge. So it'll be fun to start seeing that in the wild. Um, Not quite for our November 11th tournament. It won't be out long enough by our standards to allow it, and we don't want some disparity with folks who have access to it early. So we'll consider that a Harrow Deep goodbye event. But uh, yeah, we are going to talk to you about Force of Frost. We're going to talk same as we did with um, Breakneck Slaughter. We're going to talk styles, how to approach it, some good pairings, some championship considerations. And as usual, we will not cover every single card in this audio content. If you want that, we do have it on the blog. We're going to call out some highlights or ones that we think make for interesting conversation. You can call that our favorites, or you can call it the things we enjoy talking about, whatever you want to do. Um, on the subject of debating, our community shoutouts this week are two articles from two different entities. We've got Spent Glory did a uh, Warhammer Underworlds is great and the ping meta is fine, and we have we have Path to Glory, 9 lives. A look at the current state of the ping meta, and this is two kind of different takes on a topic which is pretty hotly debated online, especially by the most passionate members of the community. Um, and I think we're going to touch on it a little bit today, just as we talk through some of these cards. It is it's a thing where like uh, it's an issue that becomes more pronounced the more dedicated you are to like the more invested you are in the game. You know, the more you're making that absolute maximized build. I think um, so. Oh yeah. Um, uh, but that's it. As usual with these deep dives, we're gonna keep the intro pretty short and launch into our topic here. So main topic, Force of Frost. Can you reach back now that we're on our last deep dive? Can you reach back and think of your first impression of this deck when you first saw it? What were you thinking? Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mhm. Yeah, I think one of my first impressions was surprised that it did not have a plot card. I think on the surface, if I just looked at the names of the two decks, I would have assumed that this one had a plot card, but no. It does have a little bit of an ice counter mechanic that probably represents, I don't know, I'm just throwing something out here, but like 25% of the cards, if that, um, reference ice counters in some way. It's roughly somewhere in there. And then the rest dabble in a few different areas. We'll talk about that as we get into it. There's some parts of it that feel like kind of all over the place, and that's especially in the objectives where I was like, whoa, I don't, because we always end up reading through the objectives first, and so as I read through there, I was like, what is this deck? I'm not sure what the yeah, what is the goal of this? Not that they were bad. It was just, like if you think all the way back to the Silent Menace, like, wow, this is all over the place, and it is, and some of them are atrocious. And this was like, there's a lot of different things happening here, but a number of them are like pretty reasonable. It's just hard to do all the different things if you're looking at the objectives. So I think my first impression was the things you're reaching for on this deck. If you're reaching for it, it's because there's something in the power cards that are particularly interesting to you. Yeah, especially in a nemesis pairing, I would say. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think we can jump right in. Do you want to talk objectives right away here? We kind of alluded how they're a little scattershot, so let's dig into that a little bit. Before we talk specific cards, I'll just kind of summarize where we've got. I don't know. I'd say like three are sort of positioning related. There's two or three that are aggro related, and these have some overlap. There's uh, two that are magic related, and one that's like this Winter's Hunger is about as pure a control card. Like I'm just gonna score this without interaction. Um, and then and then like some hold. When I say positioning, I was talking about like uh, Cold of the Void or something like that. But there's Glacial Cool and Stranglehold, which care about holding objectives. And like that's a pretty that's a pretty broad spread of just about everything that you do in Underworlds. So I kind of think this had to be intentional. Um, if you look at some of the elements in the rest of the deck, there's a lot of control there, and if they made like a hyper control objective set, it might make for a negative play experience. Mm, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Yeah, and like I said, like there's most of these, not all of them, but most of these, if they fit into your game plan or can be a solid part of your game plan, it's just hard to have a game plan that includes all of these. So, um, but that being said, why don't we pick out a couple standouts or conversational points? What is there one that you wanted to talk about? Hmm. Mm, yeah. Yeah, and for folks who are newer to the game, when they say cast in this context, they're talking successfully cast. That's not attempted to cast. So it does, yeah, but it's an easy one to miss. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think we both see this card Bitterstorm with Stormsire looking all macho on the art, and think you can't help but think back to some of the builds that were ultra passive curse breaker builds where they stood at the back and cast spells really far away from you that didn't do very much but didn't put them at risk. um I and so the first thought is, oh, like is that around now? Is that possible? And the answer is maybe, but I don't think it's, certainly with the card pool, it doesn't feel as bad as it was at its worst before. Hmm. Yep. Yeah. Um, and you're even talking about it with Damatans, and that's a warband where all of the fighters also they all have range 3 spell attack actions, and that is a big deal because it means that you will have continuous options to throw spells that way as well as gambits. So yeah, or or God forbid you had them both in hand and just yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, because if you're going to include this, you really want you got to lean fairly heavy on gambits, right? Like you can't gambit spells, I should say. Uh, and you can't like if you go light, then you are counting on the right card order, and it's just probably not going to work out. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So looking through them, this is one I haven't actually played yet, but uh, really jumped out to me is Stranglehold. This is a 2 glory surge, which always gets our attention. Score this immediately after an opponent's power step if your warband holds each objective within 2 hexes of no one's territory. Uh, that is realistically going to be 2, probably 3 objectives, particularly if your opponent knows what this is going to be. I think I think if you are playing, if for some reason you want to, I'm not exactly sure why you would, but if you want to longboard, I think you can force this to be just 2. Now, whether it's how that exactly plays out and what other cascading things happen there, just because that no man's land is so much tighter there, it can be an awful lot if you are playing something else. But a 2 glory surge for holding objectives. This is much more reasonable than the temporary victory that we lived through in Beastgrave. Um, and I struggle a little bit to figure out like what warband really, because you are going to have to hold something in enemy territory, like even relatively deep in enemy territory. Like that's a pretty wide buffer. Not like deep, but like certainly not just over the line. You could get yourself holding something. So yeah, yeah, mhm, sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't think we're gonna see much of this, but flip tech also can make this a lot easier. So I don't know if there's a build that does that, but if you have tech that is not too hard to, or not too expensive to do your flips, like not too much opportunity cost by including those, then this has potential to be more attractive. That's, I think, of all the objectives in this deck, that's the biggest head scratcher for me. I'm like, it feels like it could be powerful. I just can't. You need a warband that has enough fighters that you could do it if there's a lot that you need to get, but you don't want them to be too weak, because as soon as you lose one, then yeah, so it's all over. And I think the last thing I want to say about it is that window is important. It's after an opponent's power step, which I actually like a lot better than after an opponent's activation. So somebody like Starblood Stalkers could get into position and then burst from shadows, grab, leap onto a bunch of things, or of course, we're talking Grimwatch. You could use their multi push, and all of a sudden you get it. And if the opponent doesn't have a power step push, then you can snag it without as much chance of retaliation. So, uh, yeah, yeah, mm, yeah, totally. Yep. What about something else that you want to touch on? Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, it's not. So it's not busted and it's not terrible. One example is I ran Far Striders that are kind of local thing. They have an in faction one that is like you have to have more fighters dead than the round number. So they have to have either two, three, or four, and that's a two glory. And this is just like so much better. So, and I think we talked in Breakneck Slaughter. There's the one where it was have dead equal to the round number. And this is just a more kind of rounded out, down the middle, averaged version of that. Totally reasonable. Totally doable. Yeah, even against tanky warbands, you can often expect to, if they a elite three fighter, they're often down to their last one by that last round. Yeah, solid. Yeah, it's definitely solid. Speaking of aggro, I'll talk about Break the Ice real quick. This is a surge for one glory. Score this immediately after your warband deals damage to an enemy fighter if that was the first damage dealt in this phase. And I don't think this is especially strong. It has some of the same issues with like strong start, where if you draw into it after, in this case, if you draw into it after the first damage has already happened, well, it won't score later. And it's one of the nice things about surges, you can draw in and keep scoring. Um, this this is looking for particular warbands. Like if you're a warband that can get the alpha strike, or if you're a warband that has like pretty good defense characteristics, hey, I maybe don't kick out a lot of damage, so I'm not likely to get a kill, but I'm also not likely to take damage. And then the last thing, like the way I scored it was using a ping. And so if you're a warband that includes a lot of pings, especially pings that can reach out from pretty far away, well then you this goes up in value again. This was like a, ooh, I'm running out of surges that I actually want in the deck, and so this went in there, but it was serviceable. And it's just an interesting spot. It's an aggro, but not just like any kind of aggro. It is very. There's certain builds that are more interested in it than others. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you can deploy safely with like Siren Eye, uh, then right, just hammer tied right out the gate. Yeah, no, no, definitely not. Yep, yeah, I'd agree. Okay. I mean, I think I have to do Cold of the Void since I got so excited on our broad overview. And I think this is one of those that I saw this deck, and I saw it in the context of being excited about the Thricefold Discord, a control warband, and remembering this kind of control play. Like this is something that you can play if there's just not a lot of pushes like there used to be for scattering people. There's a lot of pushes that bring people together. So I don't think this is remotely as strong as the Alone in the Dark, which is the what it was back in season one. Uh, but I love having an objective like this where the other person's got to be like, okay, like how do I do how much do I invest in like trying to deny this? I haven't seen it yet, but do I blow up my own game plan in order to deny this? And it's more powerful against these smaller elite war bands that are perhaps more popular in the game right now. Someone like Gitz is going to make this a miserable thing to score, but um, ironically pictured on the card. But we're not seeing those quite as much. I yeah, like I was playing. I was playing against Thricefold Discord. Uh, I think I had to mulligan it because the rest of the objectives in hand were not good. It was like, oh, I can't wait to get this back in hand because I know that he's wanting to hold objectives. There's only three of them. Like we're really going to be spread out, and I can control it, and not even tip my hand all that much. So um, I like that it's got counterplay, and I like that it's a two glory end phase that you can have as part of a control build if you need. Hmm. Mm, sure. Oh, yeah, gross. Yeah, sure. What was the other one you want to talk about? Hmm. Yeah. This is one of those cards the first time you read through the deck and you get to this one, you're like, I have no idea if this is strong or not because I just don't know. Yeah. Now I'll have to go read how often these counters are generated. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I know those are the last two you want to talk about. I just wanted to make mention about Ice Age. It's not a particularly exciting one. It just says score this in an end phase of two or more blocked hex tokens are on the battlefield. That means both available feature tokens have to be put down and they have to be put down on the block side. From a control perspective, I included this in a deck that I was building and I was like, yeah, I like this. Like I can do this with power cards. It can't be stopped if I'm just doing it with power cards. I would need the right ones, obviously. Um, and it's not there's not a ton of them there, but like maybe one power card and one kill, and then I'm there. And that felt okay, not great. And then also I realized like, oh, actually, if you play against Fearsome Fortress and they put it cover side up, you will not score this. Yeah, like there's just there's because you can't delve a token that flips to block. It's really hard unless you've got specific tech to get that cover into a blocked on the board. So sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, I thought a couple of these could have had a place a block or flip a cover or something like that. Yeah. Yep. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yep. I agree. Um. Well, all right. Should we talk about some gambits here? We kind of mentioned the power cards were maybe the most exciting or strongest part of this deck. Yeah, I think you see what gambits you've taken, and then like, okay, what objectives can I score off of that? So, the gambits specifically are 5 gambit spells and 5 just straight gambits. Yeah. Hmm. Sh- Sure thing. Let's do it. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think the main concern here is how early it can go off. And when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not actually all that worried about this, but that's because I really have some sort of legacy thinking about casting warbands that from the Night Vault era often had one caster that was fairly important to your warband, and you would not want to toss that person forward and put them at risk, because then the rest of your deck is bricking out if they get counterpunched and killed. This deck has a way to uh, fail safe that with some power ups, and there we have more war bands that are, say, you know either like Domitans, like that's fine. I can definitely spare one of my casters, or um, uh, when I think of the Gnarl Spirit pack, I think you can risk your caster there. You still have a functional warband if even if he goes down. And so when you start having a situation where like you have models that you're willing to put in that risky spot, and it's not punishing to give them up, well, yeah, then you got something of a potential issue. So yeah, yeah, mm, right. That's not the game plan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Well, I'll push back on that a little bit. Maybe we're defining it differently. Like, I think the idea of a back deployment and then using something like spectral ring wings to make sure you are the first attack, or and to load up, like I'm going to power up an attack with some passive stuff, and then hit you from outside of where you can hit me. Um, sure, and alpha nuclear strike. Yeah, Yeah. 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 Mm, yeah. Sure. I Yeah, I mean, I think it's power. So Sleek's Bowl had a post on our Discord that was like, I was preparing this long, lengthy, well-researched article. I was going to use data-driven stuff to explain why Abyssos Avalanche was not actually a problem. And then what I discovered was actually it is a problem. So, yeah, yeah. So I there's maybe a number of ways, and we'll see with this maybe active meta watch sort of idea that we've got. We'll see if this gets how long it takes to get addressed. We haven't locally. We frankly haven't really seen it much because the set's not out. So TBD there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. While we're talking about spells, I was going to hit kind of a pair, and it's because I like the design space on these, and that's Freeze Thaw Finish and ERA's Frozen Bonds. These are both, yeah, they're both Gambit spells. They both go off on focus. They both say if cast, place uh, up to one available feature token in an empty hex within 3 hexes. So the same thing. The idea being like you're putting down a pillar of ice, and then they both say now choose a fighter that's within 1 hex of a blocked hex in the case of freeze thaw finish, uh, and same thing for ER's frozen bonds. So you're it doesn't actually have to be the feature token that you just put down. But what I like about this is that you're still choosing the fighter, and whenever you choose a fighter as part of a spell, you must have line of sight to that fighter. So what you cannot do is do the hyper defensive thing, which is drop that column of ice in between you and the target, and then give them a move or give them a ping, and now they can't see you and they've been damaged. You have to like maintain some line of sight, so they will be able to, if they have a ranged attack or their own spells, they'll be able to whack back at you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and frozen bonds giving out move tokens. We've talked about this before, where move tokens are, in some sense, not quite as powerful as they used to be, because uh, well, I guess like giving charge tokens is the thing that like really took the hit because you can get charged out here. What's kind of nifty about these move tokens, because now you can move multiple times, right? So in that sense, they're not as punishing as they used to be. But laying a move token on somebody can basically cost them an activation. If you play this at the first activation, you have the first activation around two. You do something with that activation, then you cast this, lay a move token on the model that you thought was going to counterpunch you. Now that model's stuck; they can't charge, and they'll have to move closer before they attack. And if it's a small fighter warband and maybe they just had two fighters left, you deny them the ability to reach that charged out state, because the one with the move cannot charge, and will, unless they have some other way of getting charge tokens out, will not reach the charged out status. Sure. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 I think they're good. I think needing a focus makes them more reasonable. And I think the limitations that you were describing also feed into that. So, mm, yeah. 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 I managed to have kind of the dream scenario with the freeze thaw finish here where I got somebody within kill range while also putting a blocked behind them, which made them trapped because they were against the board edge. And so it was basically served as both an accuracy boost and a damage boost, which was pretty great. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Mm. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure which one you were going to pick. I was like, I don't know which way he's going to go. So, yeah, all gambit spells in this deck. Hmm. Yeah. Right. Or line of sight. Um, I don't think there's going to be a circumstance where you would, but I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yep, for the shenanigans, I had that it's a, like, gifted sight or something like that. I had that in that Far Strider deck I was running. Never I had one time it processed, I ran away behind a block text and then just sent my bird out through the block text. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, I 2 damage is a nice it reminds me of there was, like, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but something like Arcane Riposte or something like that, that, Curse Breakers would use, and it was I don't remember what it would go off on a channel or 2 channels, but it would give you a chance to do damage back um, if somebody attacked you. I don't know if you needed anyway. That would feel pretty rough. This one this one is good when I'm building a deck that wants to cast a lot, i.e., trying to score something like Bitter Storm. I'll often just kind of scan and be like, "Yep, I've got 5 or 6 gambit spells. I think I'm in a good spot." The problem with Final Curse is you can't just use it whenever. Like it's a very specific use case, and so while it is powerful, if your deck is counting on you to cast a certain number of gambit spells, this one I almost count as like a half gambit spell because in order for it to go off, you have to cast it, but more importantly, you have to lose a fighter capable of casting. Sure. Yeah, totally. Uh, well, I think so. The other Mazig's malediction, I'll just it's positionally, it's situationally powerful, but maybe too niche to really go. We could be definitely proven wrong on that, but um, I think there's too many circumstances where your opponent will have an obvious choice on like, yeah, this is the condition that I don't mind. So yeah, yeah. Uh, we could move on to gambits here. Uh, or non spell gambits. I want to talk about time freeze, so I'm just gonna like grab this. uh, it has an interesting. So this is first once again awesome art. Gore Hulk is like in mid leap, about to like just pound some fool. I love it. And I like that. Like it's not like these are videos, but you can just like I don't know if it's just because of the name of the card, you just know that he's suspended there. But this is play this only in your power step, which is an important thing to remember, and I'll get back to that. Choose two friendly fighters. Give each chosen fighter one ice counter, one guard token. In your next activation step, you must take the pass action. In your following activation step in the same phase, you can take two activations. In each of those activations, you must activate a different chosen fighter or pass. So there's a lot to go through there. You are signaling, hey, I'm going to get back to back activations. So are you, opponent, and mine are going to be more restricted. I am going to have already signaled exactly who is going to activate. It's going to be these two fighters. I can decide which order, but the opponent could activate the same fighter twice if they wanted. Um, and if they're playing it right, they may have a chance to kind of blitz in and kill one of those fighters or make them ineffective in some way, since they already know who that's coming from. And I think the other piece that I didn't until I played it most recently, I didn't realize was pretty significant is play this only in your power step. This means that you have to already have an activation spent. So the earliest you could play it is after your first activation. Then you pass on your second, and then on your third activation, you do a 1-2 hit. Um, and that feels like some kind of check on it. I guess it's less of a surprise if you're able to drop it. Your opponent will have more notice. I guess it just functionally doesn't work all that great if you were able to use it in your opponents because it gets yeah like yeah it's just wonky. But this is one of the few ways to get ice counters at gambit speed. If you are working with Winter's Hunger, then that's pretty important. In my experience, this is really powerful or potentially very powerful early where the battle lines are not mixed yet. So like we have this thing where often we'll hand the first activation to the other player in that first round. You're saying like, if you want to come at me, I'm fine. Then my warband will collapse in on you. Here you can just even delay that even more. You say like, all right, well, if you want to lob somebody in before they're fully upgraded, I'm happy with that, and then I will come back and hit you with a 1-2 combo. Um, so, especially potentially powerful if you have some sort of passive play available to you. So, um, and then I think late is the other time we were playing. We had like kind of a wide separation of fighters. I was like, you have to burn one just to get close enough to me to attack. And yeah, you can make your opponent spend activations before you commit, basically. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, 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 Yep. Yep. I would say it's even more risky to use if your opponent has a pretty big grip of power cards still in their hand, because it means they have a lot of hidden information still, right? Like, because you're looking at the board, you say, "Ah, I think this is what they might do with their two activations." Well, they're like, "Oh, actually, I'm going to have extra damage and accuracy and speed." You're like, "Oh no, this is it's actually a big problem for me." Yep, definitely. Yep. Yeah. Oh, the cunning crew. Yep. Sure. Yeah. 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 They have a cool thing where, this is corner case. It's not as powerful as some of their things, but they could move Tough Skull into position to provide supports, and then come in within like they synergize well with that. You could run your minions forward. Maybe they got weapons, and then they're both in position because of your reactions, and then you get Crook Grin to pay them off to do extra, both attack or something like that. There's a lot. Yeah, I think you're right. This really kind of unlocks. There's the I'm gonna forget the upgrade in Thricefold Discord, the spell action a focus to have everybody you take a damage. So you could say, hey, for one of my actions, what icon of Exodus, yeah, for one of my actions, all my guys will go, and for my other action, one of those guys will go again. You're like, ugh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, that's a really good point. You can get some high efficiency out of that sort of thing. I'm gonna have you just take it again. If when that thing is beeping, I can if I'm talking, I can drop it. Yeah, but if you're talking, then I gotta it's stuck in there. That's probably true. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I grabbed that one. Is there a gambit you want to hit? Mm, yeah. You can still play this even if they only have one. Yeah. 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 I I think so. I will admit that every deck I've built with Force of Frost, none of them have actually included this card, and some of that is because I think every deck I've built has been leaning. They've been Nemesis decks that lean into the casting side, and this gets cut in favor of another Gambit spell. But I'm in the same boat where I'm like really interested. I think what can make these difficult for me to include is that you don't look at it and say this is directly contributing to my game plan in exactly X way. Like it is, definition of a control card. It is messing with your opponent's game plan more than it's helping yours. Right. Mhm. Right. Yeah. I always forget if it's ill prepared or freezing venom. Um, okay. Yeah. Mhm. It sucks. Yeah. 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 Oh no. Yeah. 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 There's some edge cases where that permits them to get to charged out situation earlier, but you just don't lean into that. It does also have there's some other niche objectives. Me having spent some time with Gore Chosen, they have Glorious Battle, which is looking for I think it's four or more fighters to have Blood Tithe or Charge tokens. Uh, and so you can throw this out and be like, hey, I know you got a bunch of little guys and you're just going to throw this, but that's going to lock in Glorious Battle for me a little easier, something like that. So, yeah, yeah. I think for me, it just, this is a quite good ping. Frozen to the spot. Uh, choose an enemy fighter after the chosen fighter's activation, in which they made one or moved actions, deal one damage to that fighter. This effect persists until the end of the phase or until that fighter is taken out of action. Uh, Given that we are in a rule set that permits multiple moves in a way that we didn't necessarily allow before, uh, this has a higher ceiling than it would have otherwise. I think there's a couple important things to bear in mind. It's after the chosen fighter's activation. So if you were to put this on, I don't know, like a sepulchral guard fighter, but they're getting moved because of the warden, this is not going to damage them because it has to be the chosen fighter's activation. And in that case, they're getting, so if they're getting moved by someone else or moving as a reaction or moving as, yeah, like all the extra moves that exist in Void Curse Thralls, those are not going to trigger this. However, it is. It is a pretty good lockdown. I think it's very powerful, but I like that it's not a surprise in the way that I'm gonna forget the Daring Delvers one that's after you charge. Yeah, like in yeah, this doesn't have the surprise factor of quick roots. I mean, as surprising as that is, where you're like, I'm sure I'm gonna get quick roots to here. I even I've even been sure I'm gonna get hit by quick roots when I'm not playing against Daring Delvers. That's how. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But so this puts the decision in the hands of the opponent. But I mean, this was the card with which I scored the break the ice gambit because I put it on one of Brian's fighters that I knew was going to want to move based on how he was setting up. And it's like I know you're going to take this damage, and I don't have to get close to do it. And now you're going to take it. I'm going to score this and get the engine started. Hopefully, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yep. 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 Yeah. I and importantly gives an ice counter to a friendly. Like I think this is the I'm doing it ultra passive. I want to be able to put blocks to kind of mess up you trying to get to me, and I'm going to get more ice counters on to be able to unlock some of these upgrades down below or Winter's Hunger. Yeah, yeah. This is for people who don't know. It just put a block text on the board for the rest of the game. Oh, was it for the round? You're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It always ended up being like 11th or 12th gambit for me, but oh no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, I think it often gets cut because of situational nature of it. Sure. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I'll lead off with a pair, Armor of Ice and Cool and Calm. These both do very similar things. They grant a bonus if you have an ice counter. They can grant an action with which to gain an ice counter. For Armor of Ice, it's just a straight up action, gain an ice counter. For Cool and Calm, it's a spell action on a channel, so a very modest one. That builds in nicely if you're trying to farm spell actions for Bitter Storm, for example. But what I like about both these is that as soon as you have an ice counter, you cannot do that action anymore. So that was specifically something I assume that they put in because somebody was like, "Hey, I could just stand at the back and have Cool and Calm and just keep on putting ice counter, ice counter, ice counter, lots of casts. I'm getting benefits for no risk." But Cool and Calm and Armor of Ice, I've glossed over the fact that they will take a level whatever, a level one, and make them into a level two caster. Cool and Calm giving rerolls to cast, and Armor of Ice giving to block. But they're not restricted. Well, Cool and Calm is restricted to casters, but Armor of Ice is not. Um, those are those are really strong, particularly in some warbands. But being able to, if you can get your ice on there, then having two block or having a reroll to cast are really pretty spectacular benefits. Oh yeah, I didn't even notice. Yeah, yeah, hmm, yeah, 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 yeah. I yeah. I what I like is that you can't. So if you are relying on this card to give you your ice counter, uh, unlike unlike Cool and Calm, where a spell action is probably benefiting some of your objectives, your game plan, for extra casts, Armor of Ice is a big ask for an entire activation to do it. Not out of the question in certain plans and builds, but that's an activation is a high cost. What I like about that is that if you want to get it easier, it means that you have to dip heavier into the ice counter stuff, and that has made for some interesting deck building choices. Like, okay, well, I guess do I include these like blizzard darts here, or do I, um, so makes sense. Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, you just put it on slightly earlier, activate and get it, but it has to chain to an activation. This guy, yeah. Yeah, it's the one easily repeatable. You can repeat with Iceburn Blade and blizzard darts, but those are going to require you to make attack. This will let you do if you're just moving or using a spell action on a card or going on guard. Yeah. So yeah, it is it is pretty great. Um, yeah, that uh, timing piece is such that it's not too prohibitive to be able to throw it on there. While we're linking cards together, I think I really like the challenge it presents with Frozen Heart, which is the next one. So, Frostworm Cloak being the easiest way to farm extra ice counters. Well, next to it is Frozen Heart, which for as increased bonuses for each ice counter you get. They go +1 wound. Attack actions have stagger, and then attack actions no range limit have grievous one. That +1 wound being really early means that if you try to combo this with Frostworm Cloak on the people most likely to use it, your level fours, your level fours, your 4 wound level twos, you're going to break your cloak almost immediately. So there's a weird niche of people who really like it, like Ilthari is like, yeah, I'll throw this on, and Frozen Heart, yeah, 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 hmm, right, right, hmm, yeah, 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 mm, yeah. Yeah, I think what helps is that just on the card, it's a fair enough attack action, 2 range, 2 smash, 2 damage. That's a fine pickup, especially the 2 range aspect of it. Give you the chance to do some good things, even if you aren't, even if the casting thing isn't immediately a benefit in that moment. Yep. Yeah. I actually really like Chasm Key. This is uh, this is one that you're doing. First of all, it's an enormous key. Like Cal- Calthea, I'm like, what door are you doing? She's actually, you look at the picture, she looks pretty shell shocked. I think she maybe accidentally used the penumbral key on the Waking Gate, and now she's like got key trauma that she's experiencing looking at this thing. But but the yeah, the chasm key. It's we've seen this. If you're You get a glory point at the end of the third action phase, and the caveats are either have an ice counter or be on a feature token. Those are pretty modest asks of you in this deck. And when you are building a control build, you are limiting the glory the other side gets, and so even a couple easy glory here like this are pretty important. Obviously, if this comes out early, it's a little bit of a problem in that it's just not doing anything. It's taking up space, and your opponent knows who they have to knock out to deny this. But it's sneaking a one glory and third end phase into your power deck instead of your objective deck. Um, yeah, yeah. Early on when I was playing, like back in season 1 and 2, I thought these cards were terrible. I was like, I why would I ever do this? And then was taught the error of my ways by certain builds, so they have a lot of potential. Yeah. Mm. Uh, sure. Mm. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I think in championship you have the ability to like lean harder into a full control build because you can reach for a couple things. So I'm not sure. Yeah. Mm, I see. I get it. Sure. Yeah. If you're trying that control build, and you're trying to do things without getting too far forward and committed, then that feels pretty good. I mean, I think that's it. Is if you are because you have access to create more level twos and such. If you are trying to do that thing again, back to Bitter Storm and maybe other things, gives you another way to like maybe squeeze another spell or two off with somebody who didn't already have a better option. Right? Yeah, yeah. Here we are once again. Mm, mhm, right, sure. Yeah, yeah, I think it was interesting. They could have made it they specifically made it, end a move action rather than end an activation. Uh, by and large, that is weaker. It does have the weird, like also now warbands that are doing multiple moves. Like if there is, let's say, Kanan's Reapers, who is trying to flood you with guys, and you're like, hey, lose a power card, lose a power card, lose a power until until you no longer have more power cards than me. So yeah, no. Yeah, I like seeing it. It's not made the cut in anything I've built so far, but yeah. Hmm. Yeah, a little blast from the past. Yeah. Relicking. You can't. It's restricted to spellcaster. Well, you can. You could. Yeah, you could. Yeah. The build is there. It's happening. Yeah. Yeah. You're in the danger zone to be doing this in the first place, and so you have an opportunity cost. Is it more valuable to you to break and upgrade and get an ice counter than it is to just attack that fighter or move away? Yeah. Oh, gross. Yeah. 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 Maybe the ones I see it for, and I'm thinking about these control builds that I've done in the past, and they're more tools to do it. But A lot of times somebody's stuck like, okay, I need to put movement boosts on this. I'm going to tool up one fighter to go in with enough assets to start knocking down the the control player. And here you say, all right, you came to me. Now that you're here, I'm going to strip off some of the stuff that's making you a threat. And then, maybe you dove and then put something to help defense on or something like that. I'm going to strip that off. I'm going to get myself an ice counter. I'm going to get myself a cast, progress towards the game plan, and then I'm coming back. Again, I think it end up on the cutting room floor when I've been building, but I can picture a scenario where you maybe are just so aggressively in that realm that it could actually be handy, and particularly important. You can pick which upgrade is broken. Yeah. Yeah. Mm, right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's an interesting, like, sort of 1-2 punch where you say, "Hey, I've got icy glare or what icy foreboding, whatever it was." Yeah, icy foreboding. Um, and you're like, well, to avoid this situation, I'm going to play out my power cards early. And then you're like, okay, well, now that they're out, I'm going to start breaking them with this stuff. Like, yeah. Anyway, yeah, 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 sure. Oh well, we did it. We went through all the upgrades. So, yep. But we said they were the particularly interesting part of the deck. What did you think of for pairings? Let's talk Nemesis first. Mhm, yeah. Yeah, I played a game specifically with that build today and had Bitter Storm in hand at the start, and I cast three spells, and three spells in the rounds. Yeah, and some of it was I they they have good fighter, they have great fighters, and what they really love the armor of ice, the because you put that on one of the little guys, they go up to level 2, they jump to 2 block, and guess what? When they're inspired, they, count both block and dodge as being successful. So, yeah, so they get really tanky, they become a level 2, like, man, really, really handy, pickup on that. So that on its own is pretty great. There's some other minor synergies like Blizzard Darts. You can farm ice with it, and then they have I think it's lightning whip. That's after you. It's restricted to Amos and Rastus, where you after you deal damage with an attack, you can just do an extra point of damage. And so, yep, yep, Yeah. They have to pick pretty heavily from this deck though, because their objective deck is pretty. It has some really shocking things in there. There's like a one glory end phase for like all three of your fighters are alive and each have an upgrade. And you're like, whoa, wow, okay. Um, so that's where I think every time I managed that build, I was like, the last 25% of this feels pretty hinky. Like I'm like, I don't know if this um, is actually going to work. I think that is a warband will that really likes this in championship a lot. Yeah. Yeah, sure, totally, totally. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a yeah wound transfer. Yeah, yeah, and they actually have an in faction way to get to level 2 as well. So you could you could get yourself three level twos there with the uh yeah. I So I found their end phase felt fine. There you could do stuff that slotted fine. The surges is where it got really kind of challenging. Ran out of speed. They got a couple that are great, like Spirited Attempt. Hey, you attacked me and did some damage. I'm alive. Cool. Like that's a very controlly objective. But there were other ones that were like, your whole warband is in enemy territory. Like, ooh, that's not what I was thinking of. So it just would take a little bit of a rethinking of what it what you're using this deck for, because I've been doing the obvious thing, which is like I'll try and do something where I can sit back and cast spells. And they may be a version of this where like I will cast spells, but I will not be sitting back. I'm going to be flying forward and making stuff happen there. So yeah, 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 yeah. I think the obvious choice that when I got done building Curse Breakers and Nemesis with this, I was like, well, why not just do Storm Coven and tried that. Storm Coven also have that deal where almost, I mean, you know much better than I do, but a huge percentage of their end phases are, hey, are you holding something in enemy territory? And you're like, oh, right. So it's those end phases force some engagement in a way that you can lean a little bit away from it with this deck because it's got some things like Cold of the Void or Winter's Hunger can take some of the pressure off that. But yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. You can. It's a interesting thing where you can get Domiton to two block in a way that he's not normally able to. Yeah, 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 yeah. They have an upgrade as well that is particularly. I mean, it's helpful in general, but I think it's particularly helpful for this deck. You will probably know the name better than me. It makes all your spells just count as if they needed channels instead. Scrolls of the Spell Seeker, maybe. Yeah. And because this deck has so much stuff that is looking for focus, you're like, well, we'll just make those that little bit easier, a little bit more reliable. That's pretty nifty. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I've done that exact combination and it felt pretty good. I liked it a lot. I like um, being able to bring Vex more up to a level 2. I liked being able to throw 2 block onto Lassivere. There's a lot of interactions that are quite solid with this. Um, yeah, I think taking a warband that has control elements and mixing it with a Universal Rivals deck that has control elements, well, that's two great tastes that taste great together, and you are ready to go. And again, like Championship even pushes that further. So, yeah, I think it's totally viable with them. I have this. I've not built it yet, but talking about the Championship version, um, there is the spell option where because they've got um, the cacophony. They got two surges in faction for attempting to throw spells, both of which are pretty darn reasonable. Um, that makes it hard to not go that route. But if you were to choose not to, some of the gambit and upgrade control options here, or even a few of the spells, and then mix that in with toxic terrors control options with some of the that we were talking about earlier with ill prepared or freezing venom can be really reduce the options available to the opponent. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, not necessarily strictly an example of this, but the most recent game I tried out with Force of Frost, it was Curse Breaker's Force of Frost against Thrice Fold with Seismic Shock, actually. So it was a lot of casting back and forth, and it was like, oh, I forgot about this. Like we both thought we had the edge on standoff, uh, and so it was like, okay, what might he be scoring? Like it brought me back to some of those days of like really trying to get in your opponent's head because of exactly what you said. Like if I can deny one two glory objective, that could be the edge, and it was. Like I think the game got decided 10-8 at the end, with the last 2 points coming from Chasm Key and I I think the Magical Supremacy, which is a curse breakers. You cast two spells or whatever. So, um, but yeah, like razor thin, they get one more two glory objective, and then we're down to tiebreakers. So, um, yeah, I hope people find some enjoyment with that kind of play. Um, and I'm glad to see some options for it, like seeping back in. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Mm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of options. If we're, I kind of maybe the last question I want to ask about pairings and building, and it's tough because, like we said, there's a lot of, obviously we talked a ton about the magic and the control elements that are exist in the power cards here, but given the objectives are kind of all over the place, is there a particular plot locked deck that you see salting this in with? Like, obviously we talked about the non plot lock stuff, like magic, seismic shocks got a lot that you're going to overlap with. Control, toxic terrors might have some of that, but when it comes to something that's plot locked, what do you see as being a likely candidate to pair up with? Mm, mm. Ooh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for me, what jumped out in the possibly the current meta is maybe a daring delvers. If you've got the restricted space, then uh, picking up sudden demise with all the pings that you're going to have access to is a big deal. And then daring delvers is the one that's got uh, 9 lives on it, um, which if you've got somebody you're trying to keep alive till the end of the game, then that's an important one. Um, so yeah, I it's tough to say whether you will spring for it, but and then also obviously like add on top of whatever spell pings you got. One of the we already talked about it, the root snare. What am I thinking of? Quick roots. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I did have a lot of fun building with this. I need to branch out a little bit. I kind of did multiple iterations of the same. Like, what if it's magic with these guys, or magic with these guys, or magic with these guys? And I've talked about like the possibility of like non magic stuff. I need to dip into that a little bit. See what's there. Yep. Yep. Yeah. But I think that's going to about cover it. Is there anything else we wanted to touch on before we close things out? Yep. They're great. Yeah, totally. Well, all right, that will do it for us. You can talk to us on our Discord, or if you want to send us an email, whatthehexcast@gmail.com. on the site formerly known as Twitter at WTHcast. You can check out all our content at themortalrealms.com. That's where you go to see any of our blog entries or any of the content from the other podcasts on our network. We should say thanks to the Mortal Realms for having us on that network. And we should also say thanks to GW for the preview copy to help us get some of those extra reps in early on. That will conclude, as I said at the start, it will conclude our run of minisodes. And by minisodes, I mean just regular episodes that are coming more frequently. um, but we'll be returning to our once every 2 weeks schedule, and we're going to kind of huddle up and figure out what the next one's going to be. We got a couple possibilities. We're talking deck builds or uh, bat reps or even talking about rotation. We have that thing. So if there were any Harrow Deep Era cards or interactions that you're sad to see or glad to see go, you can let us know, and we'll talk about those. We got our final segments here, Phil. Flavor text quiz. You ready for it? Okay. This one is a quote by Doraz Giant Fell. Calthea, are you all right? It is, yeah. Yeah. I think I didn't notice that quote like linked with the art so well. Like, I was like, when I first saw the art, I'm like, oh, they just kind of made her look weird. I'm like, no, that was intentional, I guess. So, yeah, maybe it's, yeah, maybe it's taking her back to, to some of the previous seasons. But, all right. Well, for your recommended listening, I'm going to give a nod to the uh, metal inclinations of my other co-hosts here. We'll go with Celtic Frost, a dying god coming into human flesh, and that'll do it for what the hex. I've been Davy. Awesome. Yeah, man. I'm gonna scamper upstairs and go to bed. But this game that we played today, I think it was Brian's only his second game with this particular build of the Thrice Fold and Seismic Shock. And so that combined with like the real tough decisions that control puts on you, like at one point he was like, I kind of have analysis paralysis right now. I'm like, I can tell because we, we we've been sitting waiting to decide who goes first in this second round for a probably a good 5 or 6 minutes at this point. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating, but I remember I was sitting there. I was like, every so often I'm like, so it's your choice. And he's like, yep. I'm thinking, I was like, okay. I was kind of hoping that we couldn't hear each other or something, and that was why. Yeah. All right, carry on. But yeah, yep, okay, okay, okay. All right. Well, thanks for running that down. No, me neither. No, no idea whatsoever. Yeah. I think I just had the thought. I was like, I bet you that is not too far away. They usually have a fair lead time, but yeah. All right. Uh, yep. Thanks for hopping on. We'll catch you later.